Hello and welcome to Bridge of Light, documenting the ascension. This process is to learn about people's stories and experiences of awakening and ascension to be able to create an energetic bridge of light for the grand rising or ascension, so to speak. So this week I am very happy and grateful and thankful and all of that to welcome Elizabeth, who I came to know through her really beautiful Instagram page, which is under Robinsoulspace. I'll put some details so you can go and find her. She's also a qualified holistic wellness coach, and obviously the blogging you can catch up with as well and get all the details through her Instagram page. So let's just start off. Really, I wanted to talk to you about your awakening, your spiritual awakening. Is it something that you've always been aware of since you were a child, or is it something that happened all of a sudden? Tell us your story.
Of course, Kat. I always say my spiritual awakening started with the end, and it was, I say the end because it was with the death of my mum back in 2016. So I'll take you back a little bit, because when I was young, when I was young, I would always say to my mum, "Mum, you're not my mum. My mum's name is Martha. I live on this huge house on the hill," and I would describe this huge house and the door and what was around the house in great detail. And my mum she was very spiritually minded, very spiritual, and very in touch with her soul connection with angels. She was a natural healer. So she was very open when I would say to her, "Mum, I know you're not my real mum, Martha is." And she would say to me, "You've been here before. I can tell you've been here before." So the thing, when I was young, I was very, you could say, spiritual. I was aware of presences other than physical people being around. And I was obviously aware of a potential past life that I would speak quite often about to my mum. And it's funny because as my life progressed, it's probably worth saying a little bit about my mum. She was a Gemini. She was just salt of the earth woman. She was very free-spirited. She was just a gorgeous, gorgeous woman. She came from a very humble background, so she was a cleaner. So she always, me being the first child, me being her daughter, a woman, she always wanted better for me. And she would always say to me, "I don't want you doing what I did. I want you to be better. I want you as a woman to show everyone what women can do and what you can do." And I was just always in awe of my mum. I'd say, "Mum, I want to be like you when I grow up." And my mum would say, "No, you'll be better. You'll be better." So she always encouraged me to be better. And I think that took me on a path from when I was young to what I now know to be living in a very solar plexus centered life. So I was very determined, lived a very determined life to become better, to be better, educationally, knowledge wise. And so I ended up getting hell-bent on becoming a lawyer.
Okay.
From a very, very young age. And it was always, I felt like I had something to prove, Kat. It was like, I want to be a woman who can do something. I want to be a Scouser from Liverpool with this accent, and I want to be a lawyer. I want to show people we can do this. And I just became very focused on doing that. And as I went along, my mum would always get calls off teachers to say she's very, very, she's very clever, and she's got such a vivid imagination. So when I was younger, I loved to write, Kat. I absolutely loved to write. I would write stories from about 8 years old. I don't want to say it was channeling, because I'm not sure if it was, but I would always have pictures of people in my mind, or I would see paintings of random people and would feel a story coming through me. And I've got so many notebooks with stories from being a child of people who would come through, or I would see and feel inspired by. So I've always enjoyed writing, but as I went along, it was this career to be a lawyer. wanted to do that, wanted to make my mum proud, with her being from a very humble background. And that was the path I was on for a long time. And from when I was about 16, my mum got really unwell. She was about 40 at that time. She had breathing issues. She had COPD, which is a chronic lung condition.
Yeah.
And she was always very independent. She was the matriarch of her family, because my mum's mum died when my mum was 16 and she was only 36. Okay, wow. So she was, she's always been that strong female. And when she got sick, she started to lose a lot of her independence. She relied on me, my family, to look after her quite a lot. And so I started being her carer when I was about 16. And as time went on, I was going to university, still trying to follow this route of being a lawyer. And she loved it. She would tell everyone how proud she was. And I think that made me feel more determined, knowing she wasn't well, to carry on with that route. Yeah. And she's getting sicker and sicker. I was going through university, doing my degree. Finished that, did law school, finished that. And by that point, she was very unwell. My mum, she started living downstairs. She would need help with absolutely everything. And being her carer at that time, it was a very, very grounding experience. And yes, I would say I wasn't able to do probably what a lot of young people at that time would be doing. I would be being with my mum. She was my best friend, wanting to make her feel special. I had no interest in, going around large groups of people partying and so on. I just wanted to look after my mum. It was about, I'd say about July 2015. We'd been going through a lung transplant process with my mum, and she'd been in and out of hospital in the 18 months before that. She was getting sicker and sicker, and she was just so unwell. You could see the energy draining out of her, and she was someone who was very, very independent. So to see that being compromised, it was hard. We went to an appointment as part of her transplant assessment it was about July 2015, and they said to her, look, you're not well enough for this operation anymore. If we operated on you now, you wouldn't make it. So we can't put you forward as a candidate for a lung transplant. We're going to recommend you go forward with palliative care. So I always remember that day. It just sticks in my mind so much. My mum just said thank you, and she walked out, and she just looked at me, Kat, and she was like, that's it now. She was like, I'm terrified. And I said, don't be terrified, Mum. I said, you're the strongest woman, and you will go when you're good and ready. And I always used to say that too, you'll go when you're good and ready. But it was at that point I see my mum starting to transition to, instead of fighting to survive with this lung transplant process, she was transitioning to start to feel comfortable with death. So she had her goal, I want to see out Christmas. She's seen out Christmas. And then it must have been about January, February of 2016. She was rapidly deteriorating. We'd been in a hospice. She'd come home. She was in a hospital bed in the living room. And she started to say, I'm going home. I'm going home. Wow. And I'd say, Mum, you're at home. This is your home. And I'd open the blinds and say, look, this is the street you've been in for years. We're at home. And she'd say, no, this isn't my home anymore. I'm going home. And she'd start to list, I need to make sure this is ready. I need to make sure this is ready for when I go home. And so that just struck with me. And then it just like something clicked, Kat, and I was like, she knows she's dying now, and she's preparing herself. And I had to sort of become comfortable with death then. I'd never come face to face with it. And I had to hold my mum's hand and look after her. And we got to a couple of days before her death, and then the day she ultimately died. And this is where I felt that real connection to soul, to energy, to us being more than a physical human. She's on a deathbed, and I don't want to be morbid about it, but I was holding her hand. We're all around her. And it was just the strongest feeling, Kat. It was, I could feel so much energy coming through her hand, and I was like, it took my breath away. I was like, I can feel you, Mum, I can feel you. I felt like I could feel her soul.
It's so heavy, yeah.
So heavy, Kat. And then the room, it was charged. That's what I would say. The room, I've never to this day felt anything like it. It was charged. And about 10 minutes before she passed, the light bulbs, all light bulbs in the living room popped.
Wow.
And we were like, oh my God. And we could feel there was something going on. There was something massive going on. We sorted the light bulbs out, and she passed, Kat, that night. And I knew it was going to happen. She'd been unwell for such a long time. And I always felt like when I was coming to terms with her dying, I always thought, I'll feel her. I'll know I'll be connected to her even when she's gone. So she's passed away, and I'm trying to adjust, and I'm still on this path of wanting to be the lawyer, keep going with work. And I'm trying to just keep on going, thinking, I'll feel her. And I remember it so vividly, Kat. I went for some food shopping, and I'm in Asda, and I'm down the cereal aisle, and I seen a box of Ready Brek. And I was like, it just floored me seeing this Ready Brek, because that's the breakfast I would make for her every single morning. And she'd say, you make the best breakfast for me. And I seen it. And at that point, before I'd seen that, I felt like my mum was in hospital and she was still going to come back. And I was still waiting for her physically to come back. And I seen that, and I was like, she's not coming back. And it floored me, Kat, and I had a bit of a panic attack in the middle of Asda, and I was like, oh my God, she's gone. Yeah. She's not coming back. I ran to the pharmacy section, and I was like, I need some rescue remedy. I need something to calm me down. And the poor lady behind the till, she was like, oh, have you got exams? And I said, no, my mum's dead. And just saying that, just verbalising that, my whole world changed at that point, Kat. And I was like, I remember getting home, and I said to my boyfriend, I was like, she's gone. It was 6 weeks after she was dead, and I was like, she's gone. And he was like, what's happened? And I said, the light switch has gone off, and it's not coming back on, and I can't feel it. I was like, I can't feel it. And I felt so panicked, Kat, that I could not feel my mum.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to know she's made it to heaven. I was like, I need to know she's okay. I need to feel something, and I'm not feeling that she's made it and she's okay. And it was like my whole world. I'd gone from, living very physically, goal-orientated, wanting to do the best at everything, be the best at everything. Wow. I just sat back and I said, I need to feel that there's more than this physical life. I need to feel my mum. I need to feel something, because I'm lost right now. I felt really lost, Kat. And I didn't know at that point. My mum loved tarot cards, she loved angel cards, she loved crystals. And I was thinking that maybe that's what I'm meant to do. Am I meant to do that? Because that's how she felt connected to her mum. And I was just trying each day, felt like a struggle. I started writing very shortly after that, everything I was feeling. And it was like I had lifted the veil, and I could be brutally honest with my feelings.
Yes.
With what I was going through, how I wasn't okay. I'd put up a front for years, Kat, that, I'm fine. I'd go into work having, had to wash my mum and feed her and put on a smile and pretend like everything was fine, and I wasn't okay. And I wanted to have that outlet to say I'm not okay. So I journaled very soon after that, and I would write everything that was coming up to me, and I would speak to people about how I was feeling. I thought, I'm not lying that I'm okay anymore, because I'm not.
Yes.
And I started to have a lot of tension with the grief I was going through, so it was just rigid. And I got sent to physiotherapy at the time, and I was like, "Oh, my neck's rigid. This is rigid, and I'm sore." And she said to me, I didn't explain it. Obviously, lost my mum, and it was probably grief. But she said, "Why don't you try yoga?" So I thought, yeah, I will. I'll try it.
Anything.
And I was like, I'll do it. So I went to a yoga class, not expecting anything. I thought, help this shoulder. And at that time, I'd never really exercised. I hadn't really done very much, Kat. And I went through the class, and we lay down at the end. And the yoga teacher at the time, she said, "This is Shavasana. This is corpse's pose." And I just lay there in stillness. The room was dark. I wasn't moving. And just tears just coming down my face. And I remember thinking, if this is what death feels like, I'm okay.
Yes,
I'm here, I'm okay. And I just felt, it was feeling the emotion coming through me that I needed. And that practice, and that moment at the end of that practice where I thought, I can feel something more than what I was feeling. And I got very involved with yoga, and it was more so because I wanted that feeling that you would get at the end of the class. I wanted that peaceful tranquility. I was amazed that that's what it could feel like to be in complete stillness. And once I developed that practice, it was so funny, Kat. I started seeing signs. I was so open to seeing things, and I started seeing a robin everywhere, and I would feel this presence of this robin everywhere I was going before I would see it.
Yes.
And it was there. I'd only ever seen a robin on a Christmas card before. And I was like, what's this robin keep popping up? I was like, what does this mean? And I looked into it, and I was like, this could be my mum giving me like a little sign.
Yeah.
I went to see a medium not long after that, and she told me, she said, your mum's come through, and she wants you to know she's the robin. I wasn't on social media or anything at that point, and I was just blown away. I was like, that's the sign I needed. So I carried on with yoga. I carried on looking for signs and receiving signs and being a lot more open than I'd ever been in my whole life. And I think the yoga practice really brought me back to me.
Yes, yeah.
I've been so focused on this external world and goals and living up to other people's expectations that I'd never really sat with myself, my thoughts, my feelings. I was obviously a carer for my mum for a long time, so I'd never really sat with me. And I felt that connection doing yoga, doing breath work, being in community, being in my own thoughts, being in my own body. And I'd never experienced that before. So I wanted to go with that, and I would learn, about the Yoga Sutras. I would learn about Patanjali, and it was the spiritual side of yoga as opposed to the asana practice that it struck me at. It really, really did. And lo and behold, I practiced yoga for years, and then my back completely went. This was probably at the start of lockdown, and I was like, I can't practice yoga, and I need that. I felt like I needed that. That gave me that soul connection that I needed, and I couldn't do the asana practice. So I started working with other modalities, breath, writing, meditation, shamanic shaking. I needed that connection again. I was searching for that connection. And when I did this, I did a breath work just to release. And wow, I started getting, and I developed this, I should say, in the Shavasana practice, started getting a lot of images coming through to me in my mind. And it was, sometimes I'd be sitting with my mum, and we'd be like on the edge of a cliff. We wouldn't be saying anything, we'd just be sitting together in quiet, and I felt that was her coming to visit me.
Yeah.
And then I'd do a breathwork practice, and I started getting, I can only describe them as downloads, messages
from
and
beyond the veil, yeah.
Beyond the veil, that is exactly it, Kat. I would get these messages so strong, and I wasn't doing anything with them. I'd just sit with them, and then I was realising how strong they were coming through to me, and I thought, I need to write this down, because these are something that are giving me so much comfort that I want to come back to these. I want to share these messages that I'm getting. So I started to almost automatic write after I'd done a breathwork session. And I wasn't thinking, I didn't feel in my body when I was writing. And I get so much imagery, always couched in nature. And it would never be from the I perspective, it's always you.
You, yeah.
This,
yeah.
Always. And I'd write it down. And then I'd sit with it and I would get the most... It's a release is all I can say, Kat. Such a release from writing that down and just sitting with it. And I'd never read them straight away. I'd just get it down, pull a few cards and see what was coming up. And I did that for a while. And I read back through these messages, what I'd written down in my journal. I was like, this is like profound. It's like, this must be what it is to be with your soul.
Yes, yeah.
This must be what it's like to hear what I call the whispers of your soul. And I really wanted to learn about that, because we're in our minds so much, aren't we? We're in our minds, and I'd obviously tried to distract myself with an asana practice as well.
We do so often.
Always. And it was this soul connection that was giving me everything I needed, and I wanted to give that back to anyone who felt like they needed it at that point. So I thought, I'm going to have to write these messages I'm getting down. I want to put them in some form of way that will help someone who's grieving, who's going through their own healing process, because that's something I was searching for. I felt very alone when I was going through my grief, when I was going through what is essentially my ascension. I felt just alone in myself, and I was constantly searching for, is this right? Is there any right way to do this? And there's not.
No, there's no rule book on it, unfortunately. Yeah,
there really isn't. But I felt really compelled to share what was coming through to me.
Yeah. So do you, can I just interject then? So, I mean, in the sense of the ascension and things like that, do you feel as though maybe this is kind of, as a light worker, so to speak, that this is your role now? I mean, the stuff that you put out on Instagram is absolutely beautiful, and I know you get a lot of really good responses from it. And, it obviously comes, to me, it seems channeled, and it's from a very divine space.
Yeah.
So in the sense that, I think we're all at this point trying to aid others and to bring others in, do you feel that, this is a time of ascension and these messages are your contribution to it? How does it kind of, what do you gain from it really as well?
Of course. So lockdown was huge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
March 2020 was absolutely huge. And I feel like that was awful time. But for a lot of people, it triggered something huge in them. And people were forced to be comfortable in themselves, to feel comfortable with all of the emotions that difficult time brought up for us all, for everyone. And I feel like that triggered a lot of people to feel that there was some community, there was some great arising for us all. There was something bigger that we all needed to feel connected to, because we've been stuck in a rat race for such a long time. Most people have been stuck in this rat race where you go to work 9 till 5, you bring home a wage, and you're sort of conditioned to struggle for that in your life. And that unfortunately highlighted the issue for a lot of people. That we were so focused on our jobs that we forgot about ourselves. And that I feel draws a lot of people in community on social media, on video chats, on speaking their truth, speaking their mind. And I feel as though now, particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, anyone who's felt like they were ascending, anyone who felt like they were connecting to the soul, felt comfortable to now speak about that. It's always been a little bit taboo. Maybe people didn't feel comfortable to speak that, to write that, to put the vulnerable selves out there. And there's a lot of power in that. And I feel people are becoming empowered to speak their truth. And we're doing that in community. And the consequence of that is we're lifting each other up. We're all lifting each other up to this higher consciousness, because we realise when it's all said and done, there's more to this physical,
much
bodily
more.
life. And it's once we get beyond that race, beyond that just bodily living, getting through each day as best we can. It's once we feel comfortable doing that, once we speak that truth, once we embody that, we're comfortable to share that in community. And I think when we share that in community, that has the knock-on effect for everyone else to say, I felt like this and I've never felt comfortable to share it, or I've been feeling this way and you helped me to come out and share that truth. So there is absolutely a higher consciousness that is rising, and I think it's because people are feeling more comfortable to express that side of themselves. People are feeling more connected to themselves because they've had to come home to them to find out how they're going to get through such a difficult time that was lockdown. And now that things are transitioning back to almost how they were, people don't want to leave that connection that they've developed.
I mean, they're quite happy sat at home just chilling out now. They've become comfortable with it. And,
more.
And I mean, I think one of the really interesting things about your story, definitely from the work that I do, is this idea where you said it was almost kind of the end that was the beginning as well, really, because I think what's so powerful about your story is, I tend to work with a lot of people who are, in the same position that your mum was, really, and do a lot of work like that, and I find that one of the most difficult things to talk about, and still kind of one of the last taboos really, is to actually talk about this process of transitioning. As someone who's, done mediumship, is a trans medium, channels, does all of this work, I, the same as you, am, much under the belief that there is, a lot that can be gained from, I think, as you say, with this idea of the spiritual ascension, of understanding that we're all one, but also this process of understanding that, that it is the kind of energetic form of us, our soul, that is the part of us that is everlasting. And I think it's so powerful when, messages come across from people like yourself who've had these kind of incredible experiences. It's not just, a reflection of sort of modern society and how life is, but actually that, as I guess when, we say with lockdown, people came back to the basics of life, which is, have we got enough food to eat? Can we survive? Are we warm? How, this kind of thing. So I think, it's really great that you can share your story, because I think it's really powerful, and especially this idea of, the grieving person, because definitely in a lot of shamanic traditions, and I don't know if it's kind of popular knowledge, but there was always this idea that if people really wanted messages from the veil, they would always go and talk to people who were grieving, because they were so close to it, and they had that incredible energetic kind of connection that you had for those few weeks. They almost felt as though they were kind of stood still as everything was kind of continuing around them, and like, well, how is this possible, because I'm just rooted here. So I think there's so much of it that, you know, that we are taught to fear, and that we are, you know,
Yes.
given these ideas by society as to how, you know, how we should react, how we should
Yeah.
behave, you know, this idea that it's, you know, just the mundane existence, you know, and you go, 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 and then, you know, that's it. You know, so I mean, I think this is a really important part of the ascension as well, is that people have started to discuss subjects, you know, through
Yes.
obviously it being created, you know, on the, you know, kind of you know, the axis of
Yeah.
dis-ease, you know, has really made people consider these processes of what life and what existence and transition really is. So, you
Yeah.
know, I think that's, you know, it's such a powerful process to have gone through. But I
Yeah.
also think in a certain way it's such a beautiful thing for you to have been taught by your mother. You know, what an incredible
Yes.
legacy to leave, if anything, is to be
Yeah.
able to, in a certain sense, sort of, you know, soften your heart within the final moment, and to show you truly
Yeah.
what is a gift, and that, you know, this idea that the mundane is, you know, it is a kind of a state as is anything else. So I
Yeah.
mean, not necessarily in that kind of sense, in a grieving sense, but, you know, in the idea of your awakening, you know, you kind of, it sounds like, you know, you've done what a lot of us did, where it's like, you know, once you kind of get a glimpse of this, you think, well, you know, hang on a minute, this stuff isn't supposed to be real. Surely this stuff is just in books and films, you know. And then we, you know, everybody, you know, all of us do it. We kind of go running in at 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've had the, you know, I've been to many courses, probably far too many courses, read every book I could get my hand on. And you know, and
Yeah.
I've come from a family of it as well. So, you know, I've also had people, you know, round the fire, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I still couldn't consume enough of it. And I probably still can't, you
Yes.
know, if you give me the chance. So what is it that you know, out of all the things that you've done, you know, what's the kind of, you know, couple of things that you would really kind of offer to other people as examples or rituals or practices that you think could help them in their journey to raise their vibration, to, you
Yeah.
know, be able to look at life from that plane of existence?
There's a few things that I've really, really come to appreciate, and it sounds very cliche, but Capra, it's that mind, body, soul connection, and it's being comfortable with every single part of ourselves, with the light, with the dark, with feeling uncomfortable, with feeling what's coming up as it's coming up, good or bad. And so I have a couple of things that I go to feel that soul connection and to give me that guidance, because that's what being connected to soul does. It gives you that guidance that just gently cuts through the turmoil of the mind and the chatter of the mind. So there's a few things I do. I really have come to appreciate, as you've mentioned, a lot of shamanic teachings, shaping, and that just brings up a lot of the energies in our body to get them up before you do anything. Some people, that the movement aspect might be yoga, it might be dance. It's just getting that embodiment
That
going,
movement, yeah.
feeling into that. And for me, it's shaking. It just gets a lot up for me. And then breath work, it's magical. It's magical for me to just connect back to my body, my subconscious, to cut through all of the shit that has happened in the day, in the week, in your life. And I will do that breathwork practice for 30 minutes. And as I'm doing that, it's as though you're dissociating yourself from your body, from your mind, from everything in you, but you've never at the same time felt so connected to it.
Yes, yeah.
And I get a lot of messages coming through that make me feel that connection to my soul at that time. For everyone, you might not get that. It's not always going to be fireworks. It might bring up a lot of emotion for you, and it has for me. You know, there's been times when I've cried. That's the release I need, and I feel comfortable doing that. So it's bringing whatever's to the surface, cutting through your subconscious, getting up bringing it up through your movement, through your breath work, what needs to come up. And then I always find that writing whatever's coming up. I don't think about anything when I'm doing that, Kat. And that's a thing I'd always recommend to people is, if you want true guidance from your soul, from your messages from source, from spirit, if you want to connect to that deep intuition, which I think is the soul whisper, do those two practices, your movement, your breath. Once you've released whatever needs to be released, write it down without any thought. Ask what messages you need, what needs to come through, what's channeling through you, what do I need to do to give you that guidance. Don't think about it, and that's the key with my writing and with the writing that I encourage people to do if they do like to journal. Don't think. Whatever you see, write it down. Whatever's coming up for you, write it down. You don't have to think you're writing a poetic masterpiece. This isn't something for everyone else to read. This is for you to get back to yourself. And then sit with that. I love to listen to emotive music while I'm doing that, Kat. And, you know, again, something that's really seeped in shamanism is that, you know, Indian flute, the drums, getting the energy system and it's getting our chakra systems flowing. And then I try to imagine it's an exhausting process once you've done your shaking, once you've done your breathing, once you've done your writing. Just sit with it. Cry, do the release. Quite often you'll find when you're moving stuff to heal, to feel that ascension, you'll yawn.
Yes.
You'll sigh. There'll be guttural noises that might need to come out. Let that out. Don't feel embarrassed to do that. Put yourself in a safe space to get it all out. And then sit with that and come back to those little messages. You might want to pull a card at that point because you're very connected to source at that point. If you like oracle cards and things like that, just gives you a little bit of direction and guidance on what you need. And I will always recommend trying to build that practice, whatever works for you, to come back to you, to your soul every time. And it's going to be different. A practice will be different for everyone. And my biggest thing is to try everything to find out what works for you. Yoga, breathwork, dance, walking in nature. You would be so surprised about how grounded and how elevated you will feel just taking a gentle walk. Just listening to music, things that, you know, we take for granted. Being comfortable in quietness as well, Kat, is a huge thing.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, I mean, the comfort thing that you talk about is really, you know, that's something that almost comes from releasing all of these kind of things, you know, through journaling. You know, I'm a big one for sound as well, you know, and I mean, I think journaling is really important, you know, and I work with a lot of people, you know, and people get very nervous about writing it down, and I encourage them to start off with, I say, look, just burn it after you've done it, you know, then no one can find it. So, you know, it's like even worse than someone reading your diary. But I mean, I think it's you know, as you say, it's so important to work through these processes, you know, and you know, in a lot of the, you know, when we look at the traditions, you know, life is change and life is movement, you know. So, you know, this idea of shape, I always remember we used to have one of the kind of old sort of monk guys that used to come and do the Qigong with us. And he used to shake like this and jump up and down, and he'd be giggling. And he said, right, now try and be sad. And we'd all be there like shaking and giggling. And you just, I mean, you know, in a certain sense, you know, it's so ridiculous. There's no way you could, you know, you can even contemplate that process. Making stuff up and getting all the emotions out. And it can make us really happy, and it can make us really start to change things. You know, I think there's a great meme where it says, you know, you can't, you know, if you do the same thing every day, day in, day out, nothing's going to change. So I think physical movement's really important. And I think with the journaling, as well as you've said, you know, this idea that to just kind of let things out and let this process out. And, you know, I think it allows us to make that contact, you know, because, I mean, for me, you know, one of the things, I mean, obviously I'm, you know, I always kind of laugh. I say, you know, I'm happy enough in my crazy now to go and quite happily, you know, scream my head off down in the middle by the river in front of people. You know, I'm past caring. Do you know what I mean?
But
absolutely. It's this. I think it's what you've talked about a lot is this kind of magical connection. This beautiful feeling of energy. And to me, that's kind of the most important thing and aspect to it. I think in my journey, because I was brought up in a tradition where there was what I call the middlemen. So it's like you went to the temple and they put a word in, and I think, for me, one of the most important things I think about the ascension is that's kind of leaving the way now, and that we are beginning to create our own direct connections, to remember, that we are all sort of divine in that sense, and kind of that sort of leads me round very, very nicely to, you're very humble about what you do, but you're obviously, you do this holistic wellness coaching, and I honestly believe myself personally, I think, some of the words and the blogs that you publish are, very much from this kind of form of energy. And I would really encourage anyone that's watching this to take that chance and have a read through Elizabeth's stuff, and beautifully your account is called Robinsoulspace. So what's been lovely for me today is to obviously have worked out where that wording comes from, which actually makes it, a very, very beautiful in itself, which I think is lovely. So I'd like very much to thank you for joining me today, for being my guest on here, for sharing your story. And I hope that it brings inspiration to people who are watching this, and I hope that it brings, some clarity and comfort to anyone that may have been or is in a similar situation. It's great gratitude and thanks. So is there anything that you would like to say as a final nugget of knowledge to people?
One of my favourite ever sayings that I come back to time and time again, Kat, is we are souls with bodies, we are bodies with souls. And it's to come back to that soul connection every time. We're all healing, we're all going through shit, we're all dealing with a lot, and your soul is what will help your healing, whatever you're going through. So remember, as much attention that you give to your body, as much attention that you give to your mind, remember to come back to your soul, because you'll always, always have that whisper. It's always very quiet. When you come back to that whisper of your soul, you'll never go wrong, and you'll be gentle on yourself to help you healing.
Beautiful. Well, that's an absolutely wonderful statement to finish all of this on, and so beautifully said and so eloquent, as are most of your words. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for watching, and we'll let you know when the next Bridge of Light is out. Take care.